Hello everyone, Connor Whitmore here again with another review for you on the Nawtystep channel, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the new compilation from Interval Audio, Without God Season 6. This is the 5th mammoth collection this year from one of the biggest labels in underground bass music right now, Interval Audio. A follow-up to Third Interval, another huge assortment of tracks, a load of variation, some really special moments across the 20 songs. I covered it, if you may remember, by doing a top 10, but for this one I think I'm going to go back to basics and do a track-by-track review. That way I talk about every song here, which is great for those watching as it covers all ground and includes the favourites of everyone, not just a few, but also for the producers themselves, most of whom I think are starting out, so it works as a kind of feedback thing as well. Gonna go through all 20 here from start to finish, some of which I have a lot to say about and others not quite as much. So I'm hoping that we get a nice rounded video, gonna finish it off with a couple of closing thoughts, and of course my favourites on the compilation. And so, here we go, track 1, Punishment with Hierophant. I think this song sets a precedent for a fair bit of the compilation in that the drop comes pretty suddenly after the introduction. That fuzzy pan snare sound in the heaviest parts, emphatic, pretty heavy spaced out dubstep, some amazing stacked delivery here, the triplet notes, the quickening of everything, and there's a really good awareness of the placement of all of those sounds as well. The midsection I think is also fantastic, that moment of quiet really luring you back in, really well done, and the second drop itself is a fantastic switch up, just a slightly cleverer version of the first, which I think works well as a contrast and development. This song, Hierophant, structurally really on point, quite straightforward but in a good way, right length of every section, so yeah, pretty solid. At number 2 we have Scum with Tomboy. Quite weird introduction here. The first drop is okay. Flat percussion means that the sounds that we get aren't unleashed quite enough. The skittish moments I find really nice. Good development there. Progresses really well generally, I think. The second drop I find pretty guttural. Nice kind of change there from the first drop stylistically. But a similar problem in that the percussion, again, does just need sharpening all round. To kind of unleash everything that lies on top. Overall, a song where you get really nice sounds, but it does feel slightly laboured because the sound isn't quite fresh enough. Weirdness carries on as well from the introduction. You do warm to it in a way over time, but it still is a bit off. So yeah, overall, not a massive fan, but some good moments to it. At number 3 we have Mask with Morning. Nice feel and mood to the introduction here, but musically a bit scattered, without a true direction or aim to it in my opinion. I enjoy the bright build, the first build. Really does pick the track up at that point, I think. The first drop is very hellish, good sounds on offer, but the definition of them is not quite there. And it is unique in its delivery, I'd have to say, but not to say that it works necessarily as a kind of melding of elements, if you will. Throughout the track here, not just the first drop, it's very hellish stuff, almost frightening quality to it, demented and impure, and it works in that respect. I appreciate the theme of it, but in bringing those sounds together, it really is a bit convoluted, I'd have to say. At number 4 we have Nimda with What's Going On. A pretty cutting feel to the dubstep here. Again, the percussion isn't quite there for me, but the ideas I like. The scattergun development from the first drop is pretty cool, but just needs more of a genuine direction and awareness of what's working for it. The second drop I find a bit more enduring, stripped back, very decent, and the intro and interlude I find good as well. I enjoy their placement within the song overall, the context of it. But again, in those sequences, the percussion just isn't that great. Definitely heard better from him this year. Admin, for example, released on Crow's Nest. He has reached that high standard now, that's for sure. Next up we have Extant with Fury. Really nice drums and strings and a dramatic warlike introduction here. Leads really well into the build and the drop actually. That first drop is powerful, emphatic, well assembled, large, aware, good sounds on show. Does need to pick up more at points, but still very, very decent. A really nice pace to it as well. Takes its time to kind of set a scene, rebuild, regather, and the second drop is pretty similar but with more cool sounds on show and on offer. Again, slight note placement problem there, but overall really good. I love the church organ-like sequence to close it as well, so generally speaking, Extant, Fury, top track, At number 6, we have Moley with Abaddon. I love the helicopter sound in the background of another quick introduction on this compilation. The heaviness is pure terror, savage, mindless stuff. Some really nice moments of execution, but a lot of it really is quite noisy, I find, and a bit too loud. If that is a thing. Yeah, it's pretty huge, and I think it would be mad in a live environment. But if you like that massive tear-out kind of sound, then I think this one is for you, plain and simple. At number 7, we have Ripple with Death Dub. An airy, delicate introduction, and then, oh my word, some stodgy, metallic rhythm out of nowhere, fully fucking decent. Has flickers of changing it up, adding new sounds in, different note placement, just a pounding rhythm track really, that's what it boils down to. Sounds could be a bit fresher at points, but the impact is felt through it being consistent. Just a collection of properly brutal, heavy sounds, which is great. And I like the simple approach of it as well, knows what it's good for, and just delivers that solidly. So yeah, Ripple, Death Dub, it is just solid. That's what it is, that's what it comes to. At number 8, we have Invictus with number 6. Another where the definition of the sound does let the track down a bit in my opinion. Also not quite enough variety or spice within each drop. A good relationship between the sections and the transitioning between them I think works really well. Brilliant background sampling as well throughout. The second drop has more of a punch to it, repetition of the same idea from the first, but I think that works well. The continuity, if you want to give it a simpler term. You might see a contradiction in what I've said there, but basically what I'm saying is that I like that the drops are very similar, but that within them they need a bit more going on, I'd have to say. So yeah, number 6, it's a bit of a tale of two halves, I'd have to say. First is a bit meh, and second I think is quite the improvement. At number 9, Fate and Dare with Art. A really sweet, inventive introduction here. The musicality is lush, sounds are cute. Shame about the percussion though. I think if it was a bit sharper, would have really elevated the track in that early stage. The first drop I find a bit muddy, good energy and well cut, but the sounds are a bit scratchy and off for me. Having said that, there's a really good dynamic and relationship between them, particularly in the second drop, where there's even more sounds and the energy is ramped up even more. And when it does have more sounds in that instance, that good switch up, it seems cleaner and fresher overall. So you're left kind of wishing or kind of wanting that that was in the first drop as well. So that means it's kind of, again, like a tale of two halves kind of thing when you compare the first half with the second. But also, got to give a shout out to that main vocal sample. It's called Hentai. At number 10, Halcyon with Battalion. Another which kind of gets to the point quite quickly. Dubstep is skittish, great energy, well cut, lovely bite to it. Really nice breaks here, and the contrast between the lower and the lower and the higher sounds is really quite good. Could have perhaps had a punchier snare, but in amidst all the other sounds, I think you kind of let that slide a bit. I like the distortion of the intro and the middle points as well. Really knows what's up there. And I appreciate the second drop changes as well. I think it does need to feel a little bit more rounded sonically perhaps. There's an extent to which it feels a little bit skeletal on its production front. But overall, in principle, the idea is brilliant. The layout of sounds, the pace of it, how everything interacts with each other. So yeah, all in all, Halcyon Battalion, not bad at all. Following on from there, we have Clipper with Ionizer. A slightly awkward sounding introduction musically, especially considering his remix from Third Interval, which was so on point musically. A similar thing with the first drop actually, just a bit harsh on the ear for me. And yeah, in the heaviness, it just sounds a bit too full on as well. Needs a more organic relationship between all the sounds going on. Decent moments, but never quite hitting the mark, I'd have to say. Seems unsure of its direction, its choices, its overall aim. Some really good sounds in there as per, and they're heard loud and clear, but it's a shame there's so much else going on, stuff that detracts and distracts from the good stuff that we get here. I do appreciate the length of it, points where it drags, but I like how that's his style, that kind of really extensive kind of delivery. But yeah, Clipper, Ionizer, I wouldn't say it's the best I've heard from him. Then we have Ben's Mixer and Medulla with Siren Vehicle, a really cool title by the way, but this one I find a bit laboured. The idea and execution make for something quite lethargic, I'd have to say. Some really brilliant background touches, I think they give some pace and life to the track and keep the listener engaged well. but it's a bit of a mix of lowly, drawn out stuff and really high energy stuff that makes for quite a disorientating listen. Works in parts, but all in all, not all that much, and so yeah, mostly not quite for me. Then we have Stabby with Diesel, probably the biggest name on the compilation, who, having worked for Never Say Die before, etc. Nice articulation to the introduction, quite an enchanting, mystifying feel to it. The first drop is nice, well cut, pushes the idea forward really well. Nice trickling background touches, which are so good, love them. The second drop is originally quite warped and then becomes quite swipey, still delicate and kind of fragile in the background, which is nice. Overall, a pretty nifty little tune, not incredible, but I think it does what it wants to do quite well. Then we have Uzi with Press F to Pay Respects, another good song title there. I like the winding, spiraling delivery of the introduction, a sense of something looming, and it builds really well. The percussion in the drops isn't that great, but some really cool sounds on show. However, I can't help but think how much better the drops would be if those backdrops just were sharpened all round. There's such a huge potential with them if the percussion was just propping them up a bit better. A really big potential there that isn't quite realised. And I feel like I enjoy the midsection and introduction more than the heaviness, to be honest. But I like the general affront and attitude of the tune overall. So yeah, Press F to Pay Respects, it's decent. At number 15, Fister with Les Vile. A dreary introduction, kind of hazy, creeping upwards, which is really nice and welcomed at this point in the compilation. Straight into the drop again though, similar to others as I've mentioned before. Good note placement in the drops, but sonic definition here is a bit scratchy and muffled once again. And it kind of gets caught up and stuck in itself a bit, unsure of its progression, not really enough variation, and the sound I wouldn't say gets much clearer over time. And again, I think the introduction and midsection moments I prefer as a way of establishing the mood and kind of feel of the track overall. The dubstep for me here is just too much sonically and structurally, and I think it's one of those that will be really for some people and others not. Then we have Havel and Grim with Sacrifice. Really atmospheric introduction, but I really could have done with it being longer. The first drop again does kind of come out of nowhere, and that wouldn't be the case if the introduction was just that little bit longer, but they could have had not that long to work on it, so who knows. I think we've got to just appreciate it for what it is, really. The dubstep, savage and hellish. I like the layout of this style as per, but doesn't have quite the depth that I would usually associate with this approach. Good changes in the second drop with more sounds added. It is nice to see something more compact and shorter from that delivery, from that style of music, concentrating the ideas, which I think is a nice change. The outro also is lovely, and the flickering of the fire in the background, which kind of makes up for the shortness of the introduction, I'd have to say. But yeah, I look forward to hearing more from this style generally, and Grim as an individual producer. At number 17, the big old 1-7, we have 100Hz with The Division. A pretty warped, spacey, thrilling introduction. It's not bad. The execution on the heaviness, though, is just a no-no for me. Again, pretty scratchy in its execution. A cool mid-tempo idea, but it just gets lost in the execution. The genre experimentation is welcomed, but the problem does persist throughout the song. Another with big potential, I can see what it's trying to do, but in its construction is just a bit too clunky. The electro fuzz running through it I think is really nice. I think that's probably its biggest selling point, I'd have to say, but nothing really on the drawback presented by the execution, which unfortunately does bring it down a bit. At number 18 we have, and I'm not quite sure how to say this first name, but I'm going to go with Invictive and Achios with Aperture. A gloomy introduction is followed by pretty chunky dubstep. Percussion is tasty, stodgy, but a really nice weight and kind of thickness to it, leaves an impression. Not a special idea by any means, but it has a good feel to it, and takes its time to gradually subsume and envelop you. The contrast between the heaviness and the quelled sequences I think really works, and it builds well across the board as well. Could have done with the drop sounding a little bit fresher sonically, but I love the general meatiness of it, and it does put its stamp on you. Final point, the outro, I'm not sure why it's quite so long, and, well, silent for so long, but it is overall a beefy little number. Penultimately, we have Glances with Collider. This one gradually blooms, really well built in the introduction, bringing you further and further into its world, quite delicate and intricate really. The first drop is like a more lively version of the preceding song from Invictive and Achios. Lovely wubs, great definition to the sound, sharply cut, really good fuzz to it. Just really well executed heaviness here, I'd have to say. The dynamic between the sounds, quite neuro-like, brings the compilation to life again late on. And the second drop keeps up the madness, yet with little changes. The awareness of the placement is really spot on. Quickfire stuff is tops. And it's another where the contrast between different sections is so great. So yeah, overall, super good tune. And finally, we have Eliderp with Superposition. And Interval always know how to finish a compilation with a pretty out there, different, unique, adventurous number, and this one is absolutely no different. A long outer-worldly introduction which is grand, creates the atmosphere really well. The first drop is pretty low-key, but really welcomed in the context of the compilation. The way it develops into the second drop is crazy, mad ingenuity on show here, quite the epic feel to it, and it kind of constantly transforms, mutates, evolves. Really, really inventive stuff, and a lot of the execution is beautifully done, kind of continuously flowering, if you will. Could be a little more subtle at points perhaps with less going on. The uneasy feel to it at various times is good, but quite distracting, and yeah, I'm not sure that quite works in the context of the song, with perhaps a few too many sounds in there. But the general vibe is great, and it sticks out for the right reasons. The outro here is incredible, stunning, time-stopping as well. A great way to end the track and album. But overall, and in wrapping up my thoughts here on WOG 6, I think we've had more experimentation before from Interval, but I really appreciate the mostly heavy dubstep theme running through this compilation. And I would say that within that dubstep style and approach, there is enough variation. I wouldn't say there are two songs here that sound markedly similar. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my interpretation of it. And it's nice to see a load of names that I haven't heard of before, you know, new people to follow. It reminds us of the wealth of fantastic up-and-coming talent in underground dubstep music, but also of how great Interval are at bringing all these different musicians and producers together. It's always a feast of raw musicianship, and this one, WOG 6, is no different. Beyond that, I think like most compilations really, this one is the same in that there are good moments of experimentation, more in-your-face stuff, more less so, with a load of peaks and troughs, some tracks that work, others that don't quite as much. And on that note, my favourites come from Punishment, Extant, Ripple, Glances and Eliderp. But yeah, that's my thoughts on WOG Season 6, guys. I hope you enjoyed. But what about you guys? What was your thoughts on the compilation? Which track or tracks are your favourites? As always, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, then be sure to give it a big old thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell along the way so you can be notified whenever I upload a new video to the channel, and my social media accounts are linked in the description box down below. For some other reviews on the channel, check out the link next to my head somewhere. And lastly, if it's naughty, then you know guys, so be sure, as always, to keep it naughty and stay safe. And I shall see all of you legends in the next one. Peace out.